The puppy's world was a carnival of smells and motion. His tiny paws slapped against sun-baked asphalt, each step sending sparks of joy through his body. The July heat made the parked cars shimmer like mirages, but he didn't care. Not when the wind rushed through his floppy golden ears, not when his wagging tail stirred up eddies of dust. Chase the leaf. Catch the leaf. A fried chicken wrapper tumbled past, and he pounced, skidding into a garbage can. The clang made him yip in surprise, but then he shook himself off, grinning with the sheer delight of being alive. Somewhere deep in his puppy brain, he remembered a woman's voice. "You're too brave for your own good, little one." But memory was slippery. Right now there was only this moment, the thrill of his heartbeat, the salt sweat scent of the city, the way his claws clicked like tiny tap shoes on the pavement. He didn't see the shadow rounding the corner. The roar hit first, not the friendly growl of the garbage truck he liked to bark at. This was a snarling, metallic scream that made his fur stand on end. The puppy spun, just as 6 motorcycles tore into the alley, their chrome fenders blinding in the sunlight. The lead bike fishtailed, its back wheel spraying gravel. Play? The puppy thought, tail wagging uncertainly. He took a step forward. Then he saw their eyes. The riders weren't wearing helmets. The biggest one, a mountain of a man with a scar splitting his cheek like a lightning bolt, locked onto him. "Move, mutt!" The puppy froze. Time fractured. The front tire clipped his hind leg. The crack was louder than the engines, louder than his own scream. Pain detonated up his spine, white-hot and endless. He was airborne. Then, crunch. His body hit the pavement, rolling like a discarded soda can. When he finally stopped, the world was sideways. Oil stains, cigarette butts, a single green weed pushing through a crack. Somewhere, laughter. Engines revving, tires squealing away. Get up, get up, get up. He tried. His back legs wouldn't work. One paw dragged behind him, bent wrong. Blood smeared the concrete where he'd tried to crawl. People passed. A woman in heels click-clacked by, her perfume stinging his nose. She didn't look down. A man talking on his phone stepped over him, as if he were a puddle. "Why?" The puppy whimpered. His tongue lolled, panting in terror. "Why won't they see me?" His vision blurred. The heat from the pavement seeped into his belly, but his paws were going cold. Sleepy. So sleepy. The footsteps were different this time. Heavy. Deliberate. The puppy lifted his head and saw boots. Scuffed, steel-toed, splattered with paint. Or was that blood? A hand reached down. The puppy flinched, waiting for a kick. Instead, calloused fingers brushed his fur, probing the ruined leg. A voice, low and rough as gravel. "Hell of a break, kid." The puppy blinked up. The man was all angles, sharp jaw, sharper eyes, a nose that had been broken more than once. A fresh cut split his eyebrow and his knuckles were bruised. But his touch was careful. The man shrugged off his leather jacket, wrapping the puppy like a burrito. "Breathe," he ordered. And for the first time since the pain began, the puppy believed he might live. As the man carried him away, the puppy glimpsed the biker's graffiti on a wall, a grinning skull with "Reapers" scrawled beneath it. The man followed his gaze. His grip tightened. "Yeah," he muttered. "I see him too." And in that moment, the puppy didn't just have a savior. He had a mission. The puppy's world narrowed to 3 things. The coppery taste of blood in his mouth, the jagged fire in his broken leg, the shadow that blocked out the sun. It didn't walk past like the others. It stopped. The puppy whimpered, pressing his belly to the pavement. Human shadows meant pain now. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the kick. Then, a knee cracked against concrete as the man crouched. Not the smooth motion of someone bending down to pet a dog. This was the controlled drop of a fighter bracing for impact. Up close, The man was a living map of violence. A fresh cut over his eyebrow seeped into his stubble. Knuckles like busted walnuts. 3 scars across the right set, forming a crude 3. The most terrifying detail? His hands didn't shake as they hovered over the puppy's body. The puppy flinched when fingers grazed his matted fur, but the touch wasn't cruel. It was clinical, probing the swollen leg with precise pressure. A muscle jumped in the man's jaw. Idiot! The word wasn't for the puppy. It was spat at. The tire marks burned into the pup's golden fur. The chicken wrapper still clutched in the pup's teeth. He hadn't let go, even in agony. The footprints of people who'd stepped around the dying animal. The man exhaled through his nose, a sound like a bull deciding not to charge. One hand slid under the puppy's belly. The other cradled his head. 3 reasons he shouldn't care. 1. The stench of infection already rising from the wound. 2. The $287 in his pocket that wouldn't cover vet bills. 3. The dog-fighting pit behind the auto shop that paid cash for tough pups. The puppy licked his wrist. A feeble swipe of tongue across scars. God damn it. The jacket came off. Threadbare black cotton smelling of motor oil and cheap soap. Wrapped in the jacket, the puppy felt heat from the man's chest as he was tucked against it. The thud, thud, thud of a heartbeat faster than expected. A rumbled command against his ear. Bite me, and I drop you. They passed. A convenience store clerk who'd watched the accident through security cameras. A teen girl taking selfies by the blood-stained pavement. A Reaper's MC prospect vaping by a chopper. The prospect smirked. Cute mutt, Vexler. He fight or fetch. The man, Vexler, didn't slow down. He survives. The clinic was a condemned auto garage, surgical supplies stolen from a vet's dumpster. Painkillers meant for racehorses, a welding torch, sterilizing a bent spoon as a splint. Vexler pinned the puppy with one forearm across his shoulders. No soothing words, no baby talk, just, "This'll hurt." The snap of bone realigning echoed off grease-stained walls. Dawn leaked through broken windows when the puppy woke to. The fluorescent lights of the animal clinic buzzed like angry hornets. Dane stood stiffly in the exam room, his shadow swallowing the trembling golden pup on the stainless steel table. The vet, a tired woman with nicotine stains on her fingers, peered at the X-ray clipped to the light box. "The tibia's shattered in 3 places," she said, tapping the white cracks spider-webbing through the dark bone. "Even with surgery, he'll never—" "Say it." Dane's voice was a gravel road rasp. She met his eyes. "He'll always limp. Might be kinder to—" The crunch of Dane's fist hitting the wall made the pup flinch. A framed diploma clattered to the floor. "We're done here." He scooped up Rocket. The name had come to him at 3 a.m., when the pup's whimpers sounded like tiny engine revs, and stalked out, leaving the vet bill unpaid. Midnight. The garage smelled of sweat, motor oil, and the ghost of cheap whiskey. Dane's gym was a graveyard of repurposed junk. Tire chains hung from the rafters for pull-ups. A sledgehammer leaned against a stack of textbooks. Nietzsche, Sun Tzu, Dog Training for Dummies. In the corner, Rocket's new leg brace, crafted from a hockey shin guard and duct tape. The pup watched from his nest of oil-stained towels as Dane deadlifted a rusted engine block. Muscles corded in his back like steel cables. Each grunt sounded like it was ripped from his guts. Rocket whimpered when Dane dropped the block with a crash. "You want to walk again?" Dane loomed over him, calloused hands framing the pup's face. His thumbs brushed the scar where biker boots had split Rocket's lip. "Then you fight." Day 1. Dane duct-taped the brace onto Rocket's hind leg. The pup yelped at the pressure. "Run!" A piece of raw steak glistened at the end of the garage. Rocket tried, his leg folded, face planted in an oil slick. Dane didn't pet him, didn't baby talk, just reset the stake and growled, "Again!" Day 7. Rain sheeted against the corrugated tin roof. Rocket slipped on the wet concrete, his braced legs splaying sideways. A whine built in his throat, cut off by Dane's snarl. "You think the Reapers care if it's raining?" The pup's ears flattened. He lunged, teeth snapping at the stake. Day 21. Blood seeped through the brace. Rocket's breaths came in ragged huffs, his tongue lolling. Dane crouched, nose to nose with him. For the first time his voice cracked. "I know it hurts. Use it." The morning it happened, the garage was too quiet. No grunts, no clanging weights. Rocket blinked awake to find Dane sitting cross-legged beside him, sharpening a knife. The whetstones filled the space between them. "Up!" Rocket rose. The brace felt heavier today. Dane pointed to the door. 20 feet away, sunlight pooled on the cracked concrete. "Walk to it." 1 step. 2. The usual fire shot up his leg, but something was different. His paw landed flat. No wobble, no collapse. Dane's whetstone went still. Rocket took 3 more steps, then broke into a run. The brace clattered to the floor behind him. That night, Dane drank alone on the garage roof. Rocket found him staring at the Reaper's clubhouse lights across the train tracks. The pup nosed his empty whiskey bottle aside and laid his head on Dane's thigh. A scarred hand buried itself in golden fur. "We're not done," Dane muttered. But for the first time his fingers trembled. The alley smelled like gasoline and regret. Twilight painted the cracked pavement in shades of bruised purple as the Reaper's motorcycles roared into the narrow space. Viper led the pack, his scarred face twisted in a permanent sneer. Beer cans clattered to the ground as the bikers revved their engines, the sound bouncing off brick walls like gunshots. "This where you made that crippled mutt do backflips, boss?" A new recruit laughed, kicking at a bloodstain that never fully washed out of the concrete. Viper grinned, crushing a cigarette beneath his boot. "Damn right! Little shit flew like—" A shadow moved. Just a flicker at first, barely noticeable between the dumpsters. Then the air changed. The hairs on Viper's arms stood up before his brain understood why. Dane Vexler stepped into the dim glow of a flickering streetlight. He looked different. Not just the fresh scars, or the way his shoulders filled out his leather jacket. Something in his eyes had gone from dangerous to predatory. And beside him, Viper's beer bottle slipped from his fingers. The dog was massive. Not the trembling, broken thing they'd left for dead last summer. This creature moved with the liquid grace of something bred to kill. Moonlight caught the K9 harness strapped across its muscular chest, the glint of its filed teeth as it panted softly. No growl, no bark, just waiting. Dane didn't speak. Didn't need to. A single click of his tongue shattered the night. Rocket exploded forward, not in a straight line, but in a calculated arc that herded the bikers like cattle. Tires screeched as they tried to flee, only to find escape routes blocked by dumpsters Rocket had already maneuvered into place. One prospect drew a knife. Big mistake. Rocket's jaws closed around his wrist with surgical precision. Just enough pressure to make him scream, not enough to break skin. The blade clattered to the ground as the man collapsed, sobbing. Viper stumbled backward, tripping over his own boots. Before he could rise, 85 pounds of muscle and fury pinned him down. Hot breath fogged his face as Rocket's growl vibrated through his chest. Then, boots. Dane crouched beside him, smelling of gun oil and winter. Remember him? Viper's bladder let go. The dog they'd crippled stood over him now, stronger on that once broken leg than the other 3 combined. Rocket's golden eyes held no mercy, just the quiet satisfaction of a predator who'd already won. When Rocket finally stepped back, it wasn't out of weakness. It was because some men deserved to live with their shame. As the Reapers fled, a sound cut through the night, a child's gasp. Dane turned to see a little girl in a wheelchair watching from a fire escape, her IV pole glinting in the streetlight. Rocket trotted over without being told, nudging her small hand with his wet nose. "Good dog," she whispered. And in that moment, something in Dane's chest, something he'd thought died years ago, cracked open just a little. Back in the garage, Dane burned Viper's cut in an old oil drum. Rocket slept with his head on his master's boots, the rise and fall of his breathing the only sound in the dark. Outside, the city kept turning. But in that alley tonight, Justice had finally learned to walk without a limp. The porch light buzzed like a dying insect, painting Dane's knuckles in jaundiced yellow as he cracked open another beer. The aluminum hiss made Rocket's ears twitch, a reflex left over from their first months together, when sudden sounds meant danger. Now, it just meant home. Dane studied the dog stretched across the warped floorboards. Moonlight turned Rocket's battle scars silver, the notch in his left ear from a reaper's knife, the ridge of thickened tissue along his once shattered leg. Not a pet, Dane thought, watching the dog's nostrils flare at some distant scent. A goddamn war monument. Rocket lifted his head at the silence, sensing the shift in Dane's breathing. Their eyes met, one pair black as gun smoke, the other gold as spent brass. No wagging tail, no begging tongue, just the quiet understanding of soldiers after a hard-won battle. Dane's calloused fingers found the spot behind Rocket's ears, the one that made his back leg twitch. "Good job, partner." 2 words. More than he'd ever given any human. Rocket's tail thumped once against the porch, not the frantic beating of a puppy, but the measured whump of a warrior acknowledging his equal. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle screamed through the valley. The scars on Dane's hands ached. He remembered. The first night, Rocket's broken body wrapped in a stolen jacket, the pup's heartbeat fluttering like a dying bird against his ribs. Week 3 of training. The morning he'd woken to find Rocket dragging his braced leg up the porch steps alone, determined to prove himself. Tonight, the way the dog had positioned himself between Dane and Viper's knife without hesitation. The beer tasted suddenly bitter. Dane set it aside. Rocket whined low in his throat, not pain, but question. "Yeah," Dane muttered, scrubbing his face. "I know." The truth sat between them like a third living thing. They'd both been strays. Dane with his father's belt marks and prison tattoos. Rocket with his broken leg and streetwise survival instincts. Neither meant for softness, neither capable of surrender. Until tonight. That little girl in the wheelchair. The way Rocket had gentled his posture for her. The way his growl had smoothed into something close to a purr when her tiny fingers touched his muzzle. Dane's throat tightened. "You're better than me," he told the stars. Rocket's cold nose pressed against his wrist. A meteor streaked across the sky, just a blink of light, here then gone. Dane counted the seconds until its death glow faded. When he looked down, Rocket had laid his head back on his thigh, eyes half-lidded in contentment. The dog's breathing deepened. His paws twitched, dream-chasing, always chasing. Dane didn't move, didn't dare disturb him. Somewhere beyond the train tracks, the reapers were licking their wounds. Somewhere in the city, that little girl was sleeping safe because of the monster they'd created together. And here was all that mattered. A broken man, a once crippled dog, and the unspoken vow trembling in the space between their shared scars: no one hurts us again. Epilogue. 5 years later. The Veterans Rehabilitation Center smelled of antiseptic and hope. Dane stood at the back of the therapy gym, arms crossed, as Rocket, now gray-muzzled but still muscle-corded, guided a young Marine through his PT exercises. The soldier's prosthetic leg gleamed under fluorescent lights as he laughed at something Rocket did. A nurse touched Dane's arm. "He's a miracle worker." Dane watched Rocket nudge the soldier's trembling hand with infinite patience. "Nah," he said, voice rough as ever. "Just a fighter who learned when to stop." Outside, spring leaves rustled in the wind. Somewhere, a motorcycle backfired. Rocket's head snapped up, not in fear but assessment. His eyes found Dane's across the room. Dane nodded once. Rocket's tail wagged. And in that moment, under a sun that had witnessed all their battles, the two of them, still broken, still healing, still unbreakable, knew. The best fights were the ones you walked away from together.